Hi, welcome to the PARCC online tutorial set. The PARCC assessment is just around the corner, so we wanted to try to make some tutorials available for teachers and students that may allow them to navigate the testing environment a little better on the upcoming assessments. So where we're starting is the PARCC test site, which is the practice.parcc.testnav.com, and when you go there it will take you to this page, which there's a lot of resources here. We're going to focus this tutorial on the tutorial tab, and the tutorial tab has some of these different tutorials that students and teachers need to make sure that they view before taking the test, because these tutorials have a lot of information that will help teachers explain to students what they will see and navigate. And the students need to view these so they're familiar with all the tools and all the pieces of the online environment. You'll notice under this tutorial there's a tutorial tab, which is just kind of gets you a overview of the whole testing environment. That's a pretty comprehensive tutorial. There is a equation editor quick reference available at this point, but I would keep checking back. As of the recording of this tutorial, this equation editor tutorial was not available. It's supposed to be available in the next few months or weeks, I'm hoping, and that will help students for the math assessment to know how to manage the equation editor, which is very important. And then there's a text-to-speech tutorial, which allows students to get familiar with the ability for the online computer piece to actually read the text to them. That's very useful for obviously IEP students that might have that accommodation. However, it's my understanding that this is also available to all students for the math test, regardless if they're on an IEP or not. You may want to double check that with the PARCC testing guidelines, but that's what I understand. And then there's a graphing calculator piece for Windows and Mac, depending on what format you're on. So these are the tutorials that are available here on the website that I would suggest most teachers and students navigate to. We may have a few tutorials that will kind of run through each one of these. There is no audio with these, but you can still kind of click your way through to kind of get familiar with what these are teaching. The other tab at the top is the practice test tab, and then you select either ELA or mathematics. So when you select the mathematics tab, you'll notice you have all of the different abilities to click on the grade level end of year practice test, and that takes you to the actual practice test, which looks just like the interface of the testing. So that looks very similar to the ELA. Once you enter that testing environment, it is a secure browser, so you have to go all the way through the practice test. In our future tutorials, we will go through the actual practice test items for both ELA and mathematics to allow you to see some of the features and some of the intricacies on the different types of questions, and that will help teachers and students kind of know what to expect on upcoming assessments. Thanks for watching this tutorial. Welcome back to the PARCC assessment tutorials. Today we're going to focus on one of the specific tutorials on the PARCC's test website. Again, we are at practice.parcc.testnav.com, and we are on the tutorial tab, and there are several different tutorials. We are going to focus on the text-to-speech tutorial today to allow you to see how that component works on the testing environment, so that students and teachers can be prepared for that accommodation on the test. So when you click on the text-to-speech, you have to select the subject. We're going to select mathematics. And then again, it comes to that navigation that looks very similar to the testing environment. You just have to click start, and then it kind of tells you there's only 2 questions in this, so we're going to stop and see it. So here's the question, and you'll notice when the text-to-speech accommodation or tool is activated, which this does have to be activated prior to testing. So if it is an accommodation for an IEP student, that has to be set in the accommodation setting for each student based on what the allowable accommodation is. So if it has been identified as an accommodation for a student, this will appear in the student's testing window and allow them to have the text-to-speech accommodation. It is my understanding that in the mathematics section, which this is what we're looking at today, it is allowable for all students to have this capability, even if they are not on an IEP or in terms of accommodation, which could be helpful for students and if there is some reading issues, because it will not allow the student to focus on just the math but the reading. In this, by having it read to them, you eliminate that challenge for the students. That's my understanding. You may want to double check with the PARCC administration guides to see if that is the case, but that's what I've heard. Now let's look at how this accommodation actually operates. You'll notice you can click on either one of these 2 buttons off to the side. If you click, or if both of those are darkened, it will read the whole passage. So if I click play.
For a school field trip, 72 students will be traveling in 9 vans. Each van will hold an equal number of students. The equation shows a way to determine the number of students that will be in each van. 72 divided by 9 equals question mark. The given equation can be rewritten using a different operation. Use the drop-down menus to select the operation and the numbers to complete the equation. Equals 72.
So it read the whole question. Now, if you only wanted to read from one point down, you click the bottom one so that then it's when you click on a passage or a sentence, it will read from that point to the end. This is helpful if you have long passages, or if the student read the first part of a question and wants to then go back and reread another part. This allows them to just read specific portions of the question. But when it's both darkened, it will read the whole thing. So if I again read here, if I start here,
the given equation can be rewritten using a different operation. Use the drop-down menus to select the operation and the numbers to complete the equation. Equals 72.
Now, one thing to note, when the student is going to go and then select their answers, you want both of those darkened, because if you do not, it will be very distractive. I'll show you what I mean. So when I click on this,
equals 72.
That will be read every time. So if you click so that both of those are darkened, then I can select without the text-to-speech reading this equals 72, because that can be very distractive to a student. So that's just another one of those things that you should make sure your students or the student should know how to use those 2 buttons correctly. The next question is a little different. It has multiple parts to it. So we have part A, part B, and part C. Again, with both of these highlighted, and if we click play, it will read from top to bottom all the way through every part. But if we want to read just the part B, for instance, we would toggle this one off and then start here.
Part B. The grid shows how much wall space the art teacher can use. Use the grid to create a rectangular array showing how the art teacher might arrange the tiles on the wall. Select the boxes to shade them. Each tile should be shown by one shaded box.
So it's important that you also make sure the students know that they need to pause after each part, so then they can go through and then answer that, so that they kind of do one part at a time. You may have a strategy that you share with the students that you may want them to read the whole question from top to bottom from the start, and that's obviously appropriate. It's how you want it to prepare your students for the class. But again, when you only have the top one shaded, it will only read from the place that you click then on. So that's I think another example of the questions that you want to use the text editor on. When you have a multi-step question like this, it is important that they understand that they can go down to part C and then read from part C.
Andy created a rectangular array showing how he would place 56 small tiles on the wall. He placed 7 tiles in each row. He wrote a multiplication equation using the question mark symbol to stand for the number of rows he used. Write an equation using a question mark that Andy could have written. And our teacher will type.
So, again, if I didn't hit that, it went back to the top and started rereading it. So make sure students know how to pause and start and stop the audio. And then, of course, they would answer the questions based on the type of question. This one, they would just type an answer in. Here they have to shade, and then down here they would use the equation editor, and we'll go through some of those in another tutorial in terms of how to answer and use the different types of questions that are asked on the PARCC assessment. But here, this was the text-to-speech tutorial. Thanks for watching this tutorial, and look for our other tutorials for the PARCC assessments.